caught on camera. Friday morning, detectives from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department arrested Jake and Rebecca Haro at their home in Cabazon on suspicion of murder. Investigators say they will continue their search for 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro. Deputies and police dogs have continually searched the family home. The Sheriff's Department says it served multiple search warrants at the property and is now reviewing surveillance footage from areas of interest in the case.
Well, I didn't see anything, and I woke up on the floor.
In an interview with KTLA 1 week earlier, Rebecca Haro, who had a black eye, sitting next to her husband Jake, pleaded for the return of their son.
Please come and bring my son back, please, I'm begging you.
The Harrows say a stranger jumped Rebecca last Thursday in the parking lot of a sporting goods store in Yucaipa as she was changing the baby's diaper in her car. She says the attacker knocked her unconscious, and when she awoke, Emmanuel was gone. San Bernardino County detectives, however, say her story was filled with inconsistencies, and when they pressed her, she stopped talking. Authorities confirmed this week that social workers have removed a 2-year-old child from the Harrow household. Back to the scene outside the home Friday morning.
Innocent until proven guilty. We'll figure it out when this case starts moving forward.
An attorney for Jake Haro was seen walking outside of the house during all of the law enforcement commotion and activity. He did not answer reporter questions, but did make those comments. Back here live outside the family home, a candlelight vigil for baby Emanuel is happening right now. Father Jake Haro has a criminal history. He pleaded guilty to child cruelty involving a little girl 2 years ago. He was sentenced to jail and also given probation, but investigators say he later violated that probation by possessing a firearm and ammunition.
New developments in the search for missing 7-month-old baby Emanuel in San Bernardino County. The boy is presumed dead, and his parents have been arrested on suspicion of murder.
The arrests come just over 1 week after the boy's mother said he was abducted outside a store in Yucaipa. KTLA's Chris Wolf is live in Cabazon with the latest details. Chris?
Yeah, Sharon, Micah, a candlelight vigil for baby Emanuel is happening right now, just a few yards from us here in Cabazon. Let's take a look at some video we just shot. People are gathering outside the home he shared with his parents, who are in custody on suspicion of murdering the 7-month-old. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department says, based on the evidence, investigators determined a kidnapping in Yucaipa did not occur. It is believed Emanuel is deceased, and the search to recover his remains is ongoing. This case spans 2 counties, and the murder suspects were booked into a Riverside County jail without bail.
This case transforms before our eyes. No longer a kidnapping, first reclassified as a critical missing child, then, within days, something far more chilling, a homicide investigation. Think about that transformation. An Amber Alert becomes a murder case. A search for kidnappers becomes a hunt for evidence inside the baby's own home. The monsters everyone feared were strangers. But what if they shared Emmanuel's blood? And here's what makes investigators skin crawl. They already knew the father's name. Jake Haro. They'd seen it before, written in police reports that made seasoned officers sick to their stomachs, because Jake had already been convicted of child cruelty against another infant, his own daughter. The outcome? A little girl left permanently bedridden, her brain damaged, her life destroyed by the hands that should have protected her. How does someone with that kind of past walk free? How does a man with a proven history of violence against children get another chance to harm? The answer exposes one of the justice system's most devastating failures. But before we dive into that darkness, we need to understand how this perfect storm of systemic failure and family violence converged on one innocent child who never had a chance to defend himself. Rebecca's story seemed straightforward at first. 7:47 in the evening, a routine diaper change in a Yucaipa parking lot. Someone approaches, says hello in Spanish, then strikes without warning. Blackness follows. When she awakens, Emmanuel is gone. The community's hearts shatter with her apparent anguish. But then the detectives noticed the small things. No video of any assailant. No footprints where they should be. No corroboration from witnesses who were supposedly nearby. Just claims floating in empty air like smoke. And we ask ourselves, what cracks in a story can change everything? Because when panic becomes performance, the line between grief and guilt blurs beyond recognition. Rebecca withdraws from interviews, literally vanishes behind walls of silence. Investigators stare at surveillance footage that doesn't align with her account. The scene she describes in vivid detail never happened. Yet picture that moment, her halted breath, the lifeless, yellow parking lot sliced by shadows. If it never occurred, why can she paint it so clearly? Before we move forward with this big update, please take a moment to comment below with the city you're watching from. Also, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notification bell to stay updated. For exclusives and other cool perks, you can join the channel. Link is in the description. Share the video with others. Stories like this must be heard, so we can help prevent future tragedy. Just a quick recap. The call pierces through the August night, like shattered glass. A woman's voice, trembling, fractured by terror. Rebecca Haro. She gasps into the phone, telling the dispatcher she was changing her baby's diaper in a parking lot when darkness struck. Someone hit her, knocked her unconscious. And when consciousness crawled back, her 7-month-old son, Emmanuel, had vanished into thin air. Picture that moment. The mother's eyes flutter open, the empty car seat, the silence where a baby's cry should be. In that heartbeat, the world tilts on its axis. But what if this moment of terror was never what it seemed? What if the truth lurking beneath this desperate call would prove far more chilling than any stranger's crime? Sirens slice through the desert heat of Yucaipa, California. Helicopters thunder overhead like mechanical vultures. Red and blue lights paint the small town in colors of emergency. News anchors interrupt regular programming with words that freeze blood. Amber alert. 7-month-old baby Emmanuel Haro missing. Last seen in a tiny onesie. Brown hair, brown eyes that would never see another sunrise. The community holds its breath. Strangers become soldiers in an army of hope. Candles flicker in parking lots. Volunteers scatter across dirt roads and freeway underpasses like seeds of desperation. Mothers pull their own children closer, whispering prayers to a universe that suddenly feels unsafe. And across California, millions of hearts break with the same haunting question: who steals a baby in broad daylight? But here's what nobody saw coming. Within hours, something shifts. The story that gripped an entire state begins to crack like ice under pressure. Detectives notice the small things, the details that don't fit, the surveillance that shows nothing, the witnesses who saw something entirely different than what Rebecca described. Her cooperation, once flowing like water, suddenly stops, goes dry, cold. Why would a mother desperate to find her missing child pull back from the very people trying to help her? Unless she knew something that couldn't be spoken aloud, unless the truth was more dangerous than the lie. Forensic whispers emerge. Digital tracking reveals movements that don't match testimony. Vehicle logs tell stories different from human voices. Forensic footprints that don't step where they're supposed to. This isn't just a puzzle missing pieces. It's a collision between truth and deception. What if the redemption everyone hoped for was never coming? Because now the story fractures completely. The case transforms from search to something much darker, not kidnapping, but possibly murder. And here's when the timeline becomes crucial, when dates and hours transform into weapons of truth. Emmanuel was last seen alive on August 5th. Rebecca calls in the kidnapping on August 14th. 9 days. 9 days where a baby existed in some shadow. Space between life and death, between truth and lies. By August 18th, police formally flag inconsistencies that can't be ignored. By August 22nd, both parents find themselves in handcuffs. The kidnapping story dies in courtroom paperwork. New charges emerge: murder and false reporting. No mysterious suspect lurking in parking lots. Only the parents within those walls where Emmanuel should have been safest, but then prosecutors drop their cruelest bombshell, a revelation that turns tragic into horrific. Emmanuel wasn't abducted by strangers. He was abused by the people sworn to protect him. Not just harmed, but harmed. Over time, days, weeks, maybe months of suffering that a 7-month-old baby endured in silence. And those injuries? They killed him before Rebecca ever picked up that phone. The so-called disappearance becomes a confession without words. A cover-up disguised as a mother's desperate plea for help. But the most chilling revelation is yet to come, because investigators already knew what kind of man Jake Haro was. In 2018, authorities in Riverside County raced to a child abuse emergency that would haunt everyone involved. A 10-week-old infant rushed to the hospital with injuries that defied explanation. Multiple skull fractures painting a map of violence across tiny bones. Broken ribs, some healing from earlier attacks, some fresh from recent brutality. Retinal hemorrhages. Brain injuries that would echo through a lifetime. The doctors delivered their verdict without hesitation. These injuries couldn't stem from an accidental fall into a sink, as Jake claimed. This was sustained trauma, systematic abuse, a pattern of violence against someone who couldn't even hold up her own head. That child, his daughter from a previous marriage, now lives permanently bedridden, diagnosed with cerebral palsy from long-term abuse that destroyed her future before it began. When Jake finally pleaded guilty in 2023, prosecutors begged the judge to send him to prison. They laid out the evidence, the medical reports, the lifetime of care this broken child would require. They painted a picture of a man too dangerous to walk free. But the judge granted leniency where it should never have been given. 180 days of work release, 4 years of probation, no prison bars, no concrete walls. Just freedom to create another victim. District Attorney Mike Hestrin would later call that decision an outrageous error in judgment. His words still echo through courthouse halls. If that judge had done his job as he should have done, Emmanuel would be alive today. So when Rebecca made that frantic call claiming her baby had been kidnapped, investigators already carried suspicions that would prove devastatingly accurate. Could this family, already scarred by one child's suffering, be hiding another tragedy? The forensic evidence begins stacking like dominoes, each piece pushing the next toward an inevitable fall. Phone records that contradict every word of Rebecca's testimony. Vehicle data that places them nowhere near where they claim to be. Digital footprints that tell stories no human voice can deny. Investigators describe it as a tremendous amount of evidence that paints a picture completely different from Rebecca's parking lot tale. The timeline becomes a noose that tightens with each piece of proof. Emmanuel wasn't kidnapped. He died days before that phone call, died from prolonged abuse inflicted by the two people who should have cherished him most. The kidnapping report? Just smoke to hide the fire, just lies piled on top of tragedy to create a story the world might believe. But here's what makes this case even more haunting, what transforms it from murder into something approaching erasure. If Emmanuel died before Rebecca called police, where is his body? Search teams tear through fields along freeways like archaeological expeditions, seeking the worst kind of treasure. They wade through marshes where secrets might hide. They follow rivers that could have carried away evidence of unthinkable crimes. Deputies with shovels turn over earth that might cradle tiny bones. Dogs with trained noses strain against leashes, their senses attuned to detect what human hearts refuse to accept. Drones circle overhead like mechanical angels of death, their cameras capturing every inch of ground where a baby might rest. At one point, something almost surreal unfolds. Jake Haro himself, shackled and wearing the orange uniform of the accused, walks alongside investigators through a field near Moreno Valley. Picture that scene. A father accused of murder, helping search for the child he allegedly killed. His feet moving across earth that might hold his son's remains. Was it cooperation born from genuine remorse? Or was it performance, one final act in a play written in lies? The search yields nothing. No body, no closure, just endless questions, echoing across empty fields where hope goes to die. Meanwhile, the home searches reveal their own dark secrets. Bloodstains painting surfaces with stories of violence. Missing items that should be there. Family mementos that only parents would think to hide or preserve. Every surface photographed like crime scene evidence. Every piece catalogued like fragments of a shattered life. But Emmanuel? Still absent. Still silent, still somewhere beyond reach of human justice. The investigation takes another devastating turn when authorities reveal that the couple's 2-year-old child has been removed by protective services. Another life potentially at risk, another child who cannot protect themselves from adults who should love them. Jake's ex-wife files for a restraining order, seeking to cut all visitation rights like severing infected limbs from healthy bodies. The pattern becomes undeniable. A man whose violence spans multiple relationships, multiple children, multiple opportunities for intervention that never came. But the system failed again and again, creating victims instead of preventing them. And with each failure, the cost grows higher. With each missed opportunity, another innocent life hangs in the balance. Even from behind bars, the parents speak, their voices carrying through jail walls like whispered confessions of sins they'll never acknowledge. Rebecca clings to her story with desperate fingers that refuse to let go of lies that might save her. Kidnapped, assaulted, innocent. She maintains strangers struck her unconscious, that mysterious figures took her baby, that Jake would never hurt a child. She says if she could, she would be out there searching every day, turning over every rock, following every lead. But her words must compete with evidence that doesn't lie, doesn't forget, doesn't change its story when convenient. Jake takes a different approach, his voice measured like someone who's practiced these denials. He calls himself a fall guy, but a fall guy for whom? For what crime that he won't name? But wait, if you have watched and followed the story this far, kindly subscribe to the channel to help us complete our first 10,000 subscribers. Thank you. Jake's words feel scripted, rehearsed, like lines from a tragedy he's been rehearsing his entire life. He insists both he and Rebecca love their Children that the charges are fabricated lies designed to destroy their family, but their words must compete with something more powerful than human speech. Evidence that speaks in the language of broken bones and digital timestamps to his daughter's current condition stands as living testimony against every denial. Brain hemorrhages that turned a healthy infant into a child who will never walk. Multiple fractures, some healing, some fresh, that map out a timeline of sustained abuse. Retinal damage that speaks of violence no accident could explain. A 10-week-old infant transformed into medical evidence of systematic cruelty. The medical records from that earlier case read like pages torn from a horror novel. Injuries that couldn't possibly result from accidental falls, as Jake claimed. Sustained trauma that required repeated violence over time. A pattern of abuse that doctors called unmistakable, undeniable, unforgivable. So when Jake denies hurting Emmanuel, when he claims innocence with practiced ease, his daughter's broken body tells a different story. Evidence doesn't have motives. Bodies don't fabricate trauma. Medical records don't lie to save themselves. And with each denial, with each claim of innocence, the evidence stands taller, speaks louder, demands justice that no amount of performance can silence. Can you hear it building? The echo of Emmanuel's silent cries in the mountain of evidence. Against his parents? Is Rebecca hiding behind grief to mask guilt that would destroy her if acknowledged? Is Jake's denial a desperate attempt to rewrite history that's already been written in blood and broken bones? And the most haunting question of all, if both parents are behind bars, accused of murder they swear they didn't commit, who holds the final piece that might bring this case to justice? Who knows where Emmanuel's body rests? Who carries the secret that could transform speculation into certainty? The desert sun beats down mercilessly as search teams methodically comb through another potential site where innocence might be buried. Cadaver dogs strain against their leashes, their noses trained to detect what human senses cannot comprehend. Helicopters circle overhead like mechanical buzzards, their cameras capturing every inch of barren ground that might cradle secrets too dark for daylight. This isn't just about finding a body anymore. This is about validation, about proving that all the evidence, all the forensic analysis, all of the digital breadcrumbs lead to truth rather than convenient theory. This is about giving Emmanuel a voice when he can no longer speak for himself. Communities rally around Emmanuel's memory like soldiers around a fallen comrade. Vigils spring up like wildflowers after rain, beautiful and fragile and temporary. The parking lot in Yucaipa becomes a shrine. Candles, teddy bears, flowers placed by people who never met this baby but feel connected to his story through shared humanity and outraged love. Social media explodes with hashtags that trend like prayers, justice for Emmanuel, remember Emmanuel, never forget. But what happens when justice depends on finding what may never be found? When truth requires a body that might have vanished into earth or water or fire beyond human reach? Rumors spread like wildfire across the internet, fed by desperation for closure and answers that may never come. Message boards buzz with supposed confessions. Streamers claim Jake led police to Emmanuel's grave. Anonymous sources whisper about midnight burials and hidden truths. But authorities quickly extinguish these false flames with cold water of facts. No confession, no burial site revealed, no resolution that satisfies the heart's demand for justice. The desperation becomes palpable, something you can taste in the air at every press conference. You can see it in every searcher's face, hear it in every question that goes unanswered. When someone vanishes so completely, the living are left grasping at shadows, building hope from wishes rather than evidence. District Attorney Mike Hestrin and Sheriff Chad Bianco hold press conference after press conference, their message consistent and devastating. Emmanuel's death was preventable. The system failed him. Multiple agencies had opportunities to intervene. Multiple warning signs were ignored or misinterpreted. Multiple chances to save a life were lost to bureaucracy and blind faith in mercy that turned murderous. How many warning signs does a child get to leave behind? How many times can institutions look the other way before accountability becomes complicity in the crimes they failed to prevent? The questions pile up like evidence in a case that may never reach satisfying resolution. Law enforcement continues following leads with the persistence of people who understand that every day Emmanuel remains missing is another day his story stays unfinished. Officials speak of having a pretty strong indication of where Emmanuel's remains might be located. Every tip investigated with the thoroughness of people who know a baby's life depends on their attention to detail. Every rumor weighed against evidence that might lead to truth. Every possible site examined with the precision of archaeologists, uncovering secrets Earth would rather keep buried, but the ground keeps its secrets with stubborn silence. The Earth remains quiet about what it might hold in its depths. And somewhere, somehow, Emmanuel's story continues without its most crucial chapter. The location of his final rest, the place where justice might finally find him, the investigation, reveals layer after layer of systemic failure that cuts deeper than individual crimes. Child Protective Services had opportunities to intervene earlier, chances to recognize patterns that should have raised alarms. The courts had opportunities to keep Jake behind bars after his first conviction, to prevent the violence they knew he was capable of inflicting. Multiple agencies had reasons to watch this family more closely, to recognize the danger that lurked behind closed doors. Instead, bureaucratic processes moved slowly while danger moved swiftly. Paperwork stalled while violence accelerated. Meetings were scheduled while abuse continued. And a 7-month-old baby paid the ultimate price for adult failures, institutional blindness and systematic abandonment. Each missed opportunity becomes another weight on the scales of justice. Each overlooked warning sign becomes another reason why Emmanuel's silence echoes louder than any scream for help. Each bureaucratic failure becomes another indictment of systems designed to protect those who need protection. Most, the courthouse in Riverside feels heavy with anticipation as Rebecca and Jake Haro face formal charges that will determine whether justice can exist without its most important witness. Murder with malice, filing false police reports. Two separate crimes that intersect in the most tragic way possible, creating a legal maze where truth must be proven without the victim's testimony. Bail set at $1 million each, a price that puts freedom beyond reach for people whose alleged crimes put innocence beyond redemption. No plea entered in this initial appearance. No tears visible in faces that might be masks hiding guilt or shields protecting innocence. Just the mechanical process of justice attempting to grind forward despite missing its most critical component, the victim himself. Their arraignment gets postponed when defense attorneys claim insufficient information, requesting more time to prepare for battles that will determine whether accountability follows evidence or disappears into legal technicalities. But time feels cruel when a baby remains missing. Every delayed day is another day Emmanuel stays lost. Another day his story remains incomplete. Another day justice waits for resolution that may never come. In courtroom galleries, the public watches, with mixture of hope and despair that reflects the complex emotions surrounding cases where children vanish into adult secrets. Social media continues its digital vigil, keeping Emmanuel's memory alive through hashtags and prayers. Protesters gather outside courthouses, carrying signs that demand justice for a child they'll never meet but refuse to forget. Their voices, rising like chorus, demanding accountability for innocence betrayed. The legal challenges become crystal clear as proceedings unfold. How do you prosecute murder without a body that proves death occurred? How do you demonstrate malice without victims who can testify about suffering endured? How do you seek justice for someone who exists now only in photographs and memories, in medical records and missing person reports? Prosecutors lean heavily on forensic evidence that speaks when voices cannot. Digital trails that map the final days of Emmanuel's life with precision that human memory cannot match. Phone records that contradict kidnapping stories with timestamps that don't lie. Medical evidence from Jake's previous conviction that establishes patterns of violence against children who cannot defend themselves. Evidence. Code Section 1109 allows prosecutors to introduce past crimes as context for current charges, letting Jake's daughter's injuries speak for Emmanuel's silence. The defense will likely argue that without a body, without definitive proof of death, reasonable doubt must prevail over circumstantial evidence. They'll question timelines, challenge forensic interpretation, suggest alternative explanations for Emmanuel's disappearance that don't involve murder. They'll paint Rebecca as victim rather than perpetrator, controlled by violent man rather than complicit in violence. They'll argue that Jake's past conviction, however horrific, doesn't automatically make him guilty of current charges. They'll seek to create space for doubt in minds that want certainty, hope for innocence in hearts that demand justice. But prosecution has something powerful beyond individual evidence, precedent that shows bodies aren't always necessary for justice. Cases won before without remains to examine. Convictions secured through evidence that speaks louder than any testimony. Truth emerging from silence when enough pieces fit together like puzzle fragments, revealing pictures of guilt that cannot be denied. The weight of history presses down on these proceedings like gravity, pulling everything toward inevitable conclusion. Emmanuel joins tragic roster of Gabriel Fernandez, Anthony Avalos, and countless other children whose abuse was visible to those who should have acted, whose deaths were preventable by those who should have intervened, whose cries went unheard, until silence replaced them forever. Each case represents systemic failure. Each name represents institutions that didn't protect those who needed protection most. Each tragedy represents adults who failed the most vulnerable among us, who chose convenience over courage, bureaucracy over bravery, process over protection. As legal proceedings continue, the questions multiply rather than diminish like shadows, growing longer as daylight fades. What really happened in the final days of Emmanuel's short life? Was Rebecca victim herself, manipulated and controlled by a partner whose violence she couldn't escape? Or was she active participant in whatever led to her son's death, complicit in lies designed to hide truth that would destroy her? Was Jake the sole architect of this tragedy, using his proven history of violence to harm another innocent child? Or did both parents share responsibility for darkness that consumed their family, each playing roles in drama that ended with baby's disappearance? These questions matter because they determine not just legal guilt, but moral understanding that shapes how we view domestic violence, parental responsibility, and systems designed to protect children. The search for Emmanuel's body continues with persistence that borders on obsession, driven by understanding that somewhere a baby waits to be found, to be brought home, to receive dignity that death couldn't steal. Investigators follow every lead, no matter how small, examine every tip, no matter how unlikely, because they know closure requires discovery, justice demands evidence, and Emmanuel deserves to be more than memory. But even if his body is never recovered, even if this case proceeds without physical evidence of death, Emmanuel's story serves larger purpose that transcends individual tragedy. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about child protection that we'd rather ignore. It demands examination of systems that fail when failure costs lives. It asks whether we have courage to acknowledge that sometimes the most dangerous place for a child is their own home. The case exposes cracks in our child welfare systems, like earthquake revealing fault lines that were always there. Gaps in our legal processes wide enough for children to fall through and disappear. Failures in our protective institutions that choose procedure over prevention, process over protection, paperwork over people. Each crack represents opportunity for tragedy. Each gap creates space where children can vanish. Each failure echoes with silence of those who cannot speak for themselves, who depend on adults to recognize danger and respond with courage that saves rather than convenience that kills. Emmanuel cannot speak for himself now. He cannot tell us what happened in his final days, cannot identify who hurt him, cannot point toward where his body might rest. His silence forces others to speak for him. Investigators who won't stop searching, prosecutors who demand accountability, advocates who refuse to let his memory fade, and community that transforms grief into determination. Until Emmanuel is found, until truth replaces speculation that feeds on mystery, until justice addresses injustice that created this tragedy, his silence will echo louder than any 911 call. His absence will demand presence from those who remain. His story will require completion by those who survive him. The parents may sit behind bars awaiting trials that will determine their fate, but without Emmanuel's body, this case can never truly close. His disappearance creates wound in the world that cannot heal until he comes home, wherever home might be for someone whose life was stolen before it could truly begin. We wait for answers that may never come, for closure that may remain forever. Out of reach for justice that must somehow proceed despite its most important witness being forever silenced. We wait for the day when search teams might finally hear words that would end this nightmare. We found him. Baby Emmanuel Haro was 7 months old when he vanished from this world, leaving behind questions that demand answers, silence that screams for justice, and emptiness that can only be filled by truth. His story reminds us that sometimes the greatest dangers don't come from strangers in parking lots. They come from the people we trust most, the families we're born into, the homes that should shelter us but sometimes consume us instead. 21 pounds of pure innocence, 24 inches of unfulfilled potential, brown hair that caught sunlight during days that were numbered, brown eyes slightly crossed that would never grow up to see the world's beauty and horror, its promise and betrayal, its capacity for both love and violence, a life measured in months instead of years, in possibilities instead of achievements, in what might have been instead of what was allowed to be. Until that truth is fully acknowledged, until every system designed to protect children actually protects them, Emmanuel's silence will continue echoing through time. A baby's cry that was cut short, a life that demanded more than it received, a story that refuses to end until justice finally finds its way home. And somewhere, in earth or water, or places beyond human imagining, Emmanuel waits for the day when silence breaks, when truth emerges, when justice finally speaks his name and brings him home to rest, where love should have protected him from the very beginning. Thank you for listening. Kindly subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. Turn on your notification bell, and don't forget to comment your thoughts with us, share with others. Again, stories like this must be heard so we can help prevent future tragedies. Stay curious, stay updated, and most importantly, stay safe.